All right, all right. Well, welcome everyone. I don't know if any of you are in Texas. I'm in
As
Dallas. We are completely locked out in the terms that everything is closed and it's snowing and it's uh like a 2-inch accumulation, but it's it's just crazy. Okay. Let's see if that works. All right. Well, let me. Can you please all mute your mics and so that way we can get going. All right, so welcome everyone. Amir Khan. I am your host. I host these weekly calls for newbies, newbie coaching calls. And the format is we have a hard stop in 40 minutes. So this is a 40-minute call only. And in some of these sessions, I have a presentation. I choose a topic and I talk about that. If you've seen some of my recordings. And in some of the sessions, we have a guest. And so today we have a guest from our community, Faiyaz. And Faiyaz, welcome. Unmute yourself. You're still muted.
uh, there we
There
go.
you
Is
go.
that better?
All right, man. How are you?
Doing great. Sorry, fantastic.
Fantastic. Yes,
How are you
I
doing?
love that. Well, we gotta we gotta follow Scott's thing on this. So Faiyaz, thanks. And you're okay with me calling you Faiyaz, right? Because I know you go by that. You good with
I,
that?
I've I've been called way worse, so yeah,
Okay. All
Faiyaz
right,
is
very
great.
cool. Very cool. All right, man. Since we only have 40 minutes and you did have an idea of what we're going to be talking about, I did give you some questions, but I would like to kind of change the flow of questions. Let's just start with when you joined the Freedom Accelerator program because that's a good context for everyone. So let's start with that.
Sure. I joined in December 2023, so a little over a year ago.
Perfect. Now, my second question usually is why did you join the Freedom Accelerator program? But I think today what I would like to do is let's go back and tell everyone your background, your story, career-wise, and then from there you can maybe transition into why did you join the Freedom Accelerator program?
Yeah, so I used to be a dentist. I had my own practice here in Denver, and right around 2017, just the stress of it all got to me, and I ended up selling my practice and leaving the profession. It took me a couple of years to figure out what I wanted to do. I still owned the office space where my practice had been, and so I was kind of a landlord for the people that bought my practice, and you know that kind of led me to getting into real estate. We had turned our previous primary residence into a rental. So, at that point we owned two properties and thought, well, maybe this is what we want to do. When I say we, my wife and myself. So in 2022, we sold the building and bought a small apartment building, a 10-unit apartment building. So we became, kind of professional real estate people at that point.
Right.
And
Oops.
it took an entire summer, and it was my whole family, my wife, myself, my two kids, and we worked our butts off for an entire summer to get them rehabbed. And I realized this was in 2023 that I wanted to do real estate, but I wanted something that was a little less hands-on. And so, I came across an interview with Scott on a podcast that I listened to, and it really the model just seemed phenomenal. I love the finance aspect of real estate, and I love the analysis and running comps and things like that. So it seemed like a really good fit. I also like the fact that the model is really tailored for a win-win for everybody involved, from the slow flipper to the buyer to the lender, like that. And that's what so I decided to jump in.
Okay, so that's great. I did not know that you actually own commercial property. And I don't know if you know this, but usual transition for most people is to stay in residential real estate for a substantial period of time before they can jump into commercial real estate. In fact, the barrier to entry into commercial real estate is substantial, and I've done commercial real estate as well, so I didn't know that. So that's pretty cool to put on your resume. So I'm just kind of sharing with you that once, and maybe you're already working with private money lenders, but that is a really cool thing to put on your resume, right?
Yeah, I sort of went in the opposite direction, right? Went from commercial to residential. So
Yeah,
yeah.
I know, but that definitely is going to help you.
Talking to me? What's up?
Okay, can you please all mute your mic? Okay. So next question, Fayaz, is upon joining the program, Freedom Accelerator program, what was your biggest challenge? Even though you had done all of these things in past, you'd done commercial real estate, you had done residential, and you like the model, but everybody, when they come in, there are some challenges they face. What were your challenges?
So the first one that really got me, I'm still not 100% sure that I've figured it out, is the business structure and kind of entity structure. There's been, I mean, I think every week there are questions about how it should work, and I ended up talking to people and just making the best decision I could. And so I'm using land trusts, and I've got a trustee LLC set up and a beneficiary LLC and some templates that I've been using. And we'll see. Everything works until it doesn't, and I just hope that I never get to a point where I have to test it out. But that kind of slowed me down. I wanted to make sure I was comfortable with that. One of the other things that I seem to have an issue with was I'm pretty conservative, and I want to buy low, and so I think I made a lot of offers that were sort of ridiculous, and so it was hard to come across deals because they would just get rejected a lot. So it took me a little longer than maybe I would have thought to start finding decent deals.
Okay, that's interesting. Yeah, and see, that's the thing, is one of the things that people have challenge with is number one, understanding the model. Even after you understand the model, then you have to get into the market also. Even though when you're doing it virtually, and where are you based? I forgot to ask you.
I live in Denver, but I've been doing my deals in Illinois, near St. Louis as well as Decatur.
Where are you yourself? Where are you based?
In Denver.
Oh, you are in Denver. Sorry. Okay. So yeah, so you're doing it virtually. So when you're doing it virtually, knowing enough about the market is a challenge unless you've lived in that market in past and you have some idea of the neighborhoods. Otherwise, you have no idea. I mean, you're basing your judgment on some data, which is statistics, which is very different than getting somebody like a boots on the ground person that you trust and you have a relationship with them, and you take their advice and their suggestion and then combine that with the data that you have and then make a good judgment on that. So then definitely that is a challenge. So thank you for sharing that. That was really good. So now I know you have more than one slow flip at this time, so you might want to just tell us how many do you have, so we have a context again.
Sure. I'm at 6 at the moment. My goal for 2024 was to do 4 with my own cash, so that I could, kind of my own money at risk before I tried to put other people's at risk. I thought that would be a good way to sort of market to private lenders as well, to say, look, I've done this myself. I know this market pretty well. I've already kind of taken my own hits, and so this is theoretically a safer route for you. And so my goal is to do 4 myself and then to do 4 with lenders. I got to 2 with lenders. They were both different lenders, so I was pretty happy with where I ended up at the end of the year.
No, that's perfect. That's exactly what I did. The first one I did with my own cash, and I use that all the time talking to my private money lenders. So now let's talk about the first deal that you did. The first deal was, just so that we know, that was with your own funds, right?
Yep.
You bought them cash. Okay. So can you share the details of the first deal, specs of the property, where it was, how did you find it? And then we'll talk about the filling later. But let's just talk about the part where you found it and did the research and all that for the first deal.
Sure. Sure. So, first thing was to pick a market. And, since joining Freedom Accelerator, the vast majority of people are in the St. Louis metro, on both the Missouri and the Illinois side. So I figured, there were fillers there were boots on the ground, wholesalers. So I figured that was a good place to start. So, I started doing my 100 properties there, and then started making offers through an agent, as well as just kind of looking at what wholesalers had available. So I had a big spreadsheet with where I analyzed these properties, and the way that I was underwriting was I was looking at three. As slow flippers, we worry more about the rental comps than we do RVs, right? And so I would take three rent estimates, one from Zillow, one from Rentometer, and one from Rentcast, and then I'd average those. And based on the how a property was looking, what condition it was in, I would adjust it, right? If it was in good condition, I'd take that number at face value. If it needed some work, I'd bring it down, say 60% or 70% of what that average was. And then based on that, I would, I'd take out taxes and I'd take out insurance so that I knew what my cash flow was. And then based on that, I would come up with a buy price. So I started making offers through my agents, and the offers were, for the most part, pretty low, usually less than 50% of what people were asking. And most of the properties that we ended up looking at were in pretty crappy condition, and so we either backed out or we just never even got them under contract. I came across a property on the MLS in Cahokia, and it was listed for 43,000, but it was a foreclosure. So I had my agent go and look, and it's actually a really nice property. It's 2,100 square feet, 4 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, and most of the house is in really good shape, except for one room. It was sort of a secondary living room that had a hole in the roof. And so my agent walked in and she said, you know what, everything's fine except this room. So somebody could literally live there and then fix that room up and then be completely fine. So I thought, okay, this is a good bet. So I ran my comps, and the the monthly payment estimate was around $1,100, between $1,100 and $1,200. I ran the property by a couple of fillers as well from the group, and they told me, yeah, that should be right in that neighborhood, right around $1,100. The property taxes were high, and that's something that you guys need to be really careful of when you're looking at your deals. A lot of times, the monthly income looks great, but in Illinois, especially, some of the property taxes are insane. The property taxes on this particular property were $250 a month. So even at $1,150 or $1,100 a month, that takes a substantial amount out. And so if you're going to use a private lender, you have to make sure the numbers pencil. And it's really easy to get in and realize too late that the taxes are high, and all of a sudden you're underwater on your monthly payments, right? So based on the numbers that I crunched, I came up with an offer price of $31,000 for the property. And it was a bid, basically. So, I went to the website, I put in my bid, and they came back to me after the deadline and said, there are multiple bids, so we need your highest and best. And I've run into this with other foreclosures as well. The banks always do this. No matter what you offer, they come back with what's your highest and best, and they make you feel like you're competing against a bunch of other people.
Yeah.
I'd asked Scott at this point, hey, what should I do? And he didn't get back to me until after the deadline. And his advice afterwards was stick to your guns, don't increase your bid, because they know that there aren't any other buyers. Well, I didn't get that in time, so I increased from 31 to 34,100. I ended up winning it, and the numbers still penciled fine, but I kind of look back and I go, I could have kept another $3,000 if I had not
Yeah.
caved. But it still ended up being a good deal.
Great. No, excellent. All right. So before we go further, guys, if you have any questions, please raise your hand in Zoom so I can see it. I can't see the chat. So please raise your hand because the call is only 40 minutes and towards the end everybody's rushing, so I don't want to rush. So raise your hand now so I can have you in the queue. So my next question for Yas was, so that was excellent, and we've all done that in the first deal. If it's a foreclosure or even if it's offer back and forth, you tend to probably pay a little bit more because you're a little bit under stress, and even though you don't want to be in a situation, you really want that first deal, right? So you're willing to do just a little bit more than you would normally would. And so having looked back on experiences, and I've done the same thing, and we all learn from that. So that's excellent. Thank you for sharing that. Now let's talk about the filling part.
Actually, I wanted to mention one other thing. Literally, the day before closing, I had the agent go and walk the property again, and it had just rained in the area.
Mm.
And she walked into that room with a hole in the roof, and there was a giant puddle in the middle of the
Ooh.
room. And it was wood floors, and so it was pretty
Yeah.
obvious. And she's like, "Yeah, there's a big puddle here." And I was like, "Oh my God." There was a closet attached, and she walked in and she told me there are mushrooms growing in this closet. And I was like, what am I doing? Should I do this or should I back out? And I had made some connections in the group, over my first few months before I started making offers. And so I reached out to some of them, and the numbers still penciled, and they told me, look, even if you get less than what you think, I think it's still a good bet. And so I went ahead and did it, and I'm glad I did. So I handed it over to a couple of the filling groups in the accelerator, and we had it sold within 2 days.
Oh, wow.
It sold
E-
for
Even with that hole in it, right? That's
even with the
amazing.
hole in the roof, the mushrooms, it
Oh,
sold in 2 days.
wow.
So we got a $4,000 down payment, which half of that I paid to the filler, so I got 2,000. $1,150 a month, which was a little higher than I had expected. I thought it was going to be 1050 to 11, and we got 1150. And the sale price was 119,000.
Oh, wow.
So this was a $34,000 property that in
Incredible.
48 hours I had a contract for $119,000 on it.
That's incredible. That's incredible. And properties like these are still on the MLS. You just have to look and you just have to have a system to do that. Excellent. All right. Next question I had was um so you bought this around what time? So we have a reference point. When did you buy this?
This was April.
How is it? Do you still have the same tenant or did you have to go through a eviction process?
No, it's the same one. So they lived in Indianapolis, but they were from Cahokia, and so they
Oh,
bought it and weren't going to move back till June, and so they ended up getting behind on payments for a little bit, but they were very communicative and they were very cooperative, and so I worked with them, and I consulted with Scott on this as well, and in a couple of the meetings to say, like, look, they're behind, but
mm,
I think they're honest. And he said, yeah, you know what, just do this, and I did, and it worked out great. And they've been great buyers, and they're good people, and so it's worked really well.
perfect. All right. Next question that I had was specifically for the first deal after you did that, because since then you bought five more. After you fill and your first slow flip and it's producing income, what were your main lessons that you got out from that experience, the first one?
Yeah, let me see. I did write this down so that I can see. So the roller coaster is real.
Hmm.
Scott's roller coaster for the entrepreneur. I was lucky that my first one filled quickly and easily for good numbers and performed pretty well. And I had a couple of bumps in the road on subsequent properties. Just this last month, I've really been struggling because in December I literally went 1 for 6 on payments that came in, and that was this property, and it came in right around right around Christmas was when they actually made the payment. So I went almost the whole month without collecting anything, and a couple of the buyers were not communicating well, and everybody was saying, "Oh, we're really strapped," and so lately, actually, literally this week, actually today, a couple of payments came in, and people are catching up from last month, and I'm fairly confident that they will catch up moving forward. But that was really frustrating, and I put a post into in school saying, "Hey, is anybody else having trouble with December?" And everybody else seemed to be fine. But in some private conversations, I think it's more prevalent than maybe it's seen
People want
publicly. So
payment. Yeah. But one thing I've learned very quickly from my experience is that the first one or two, I used to get a little, stressed out. But now, I don't actually. At the end, what happens is every single one of them pays because I have systems in place, and I actually collect late fees. So because of the late fee, my income is always more. So I'm willing to wait, and so it works out really well. Perfect. So you already shared your goals with us, which is great. So my last question before we start taking questions from the audience is anything else you like to share with the audience? I think most of our audience are newer members of the community, or they may have one or two slow flips. So anything else you want to share?
yeah, a couple things. So I've talked to some other people that joined the group, even before I did, and some that have joined after that have been kind of sort of paralyzed, a lot of analysis paralysis, and it's understandable. Especially if you're doing this remotely, there's a certain level of risk involved, and I mean, I would say, be smart, but be confident and be bold, and just jump in. You don't have to jump in by 10 at a time, right? Buy your first one, and try to do it right. And hopefully things work out right. But the longer you sit on the sidelines, the harder it's going to be to actually move forward, right? The other thing that I figured out almost too late in the game. So on this property, we paid, or we were actually paid a pro rate for taxes at closing, which is pretty common. But what I didn't realize is that the property taxes to the county were actually going to be due in, I think it was June or July. And so it was only a couple of months after I bought the property. And so I wasn't keeping up with the county website. The address that I had on file was a PO box, but the address was written down wrong. So I didn't get a notice. And I happened to be just sort of on a whim. I thought, you know what, I should probably make sure I know when these are due. They were overdue, and the county was actually going to send it to auction in a month. I figured this out in September, and they were going to put it up for auction in October. And I was like, oh my God. So I paid it off, and everything was fine. But, stay on top of that kind of stuff. Since then, I put some systems in place where, I'm taking a look periodically, at least until I understand the rhythms of some of these counties. But stay on top of those types of things.
Great, Faiyaz. Thank you so much. That was excellent. So now let's start taking our questions from the audience. So I see on my left, Major, you were first. So go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question, please.
Hey, thanks. In the future, if you want to just pass me up for everybody else, that's great. Hey Fayaz, good to hear your story, man. I was just curious about like when you're making your offers, and you said you're like doing 50%. Like, what really is a good offer you're considering? And it's also interesting that we're filling a niche like most banks don't want to touch, but you're finding properties sub 50K already in foreclosure. So kind of curious about how that goes too.
I haven't had a lot of luck looking for foreclosures since then. It becomes pretty tedious. I was pretty diligent looking at the MLS for a long time, and I was sending offers through my agents, and just not getting anywhere. So I sort of stopped because it wasn't getting me anywhere. Actually all of the rest of the properties that I purchased have been from either wholesalers or people in the group that are wholesaling the properties. I know there's a markup, and I know I could get it cheaper, but it's saving me a lot of time and frustration. So that's kind of the route I've gone. As far as the offers, I mean, I've actually offered above asking for a couple of properties as well because it's fully based on the underwriting, right? What's happening is that if a property is listed for 50K on the MLS and the rent comps and the condition tell me that I should only be buying it for 23, well, then that's the offer that I'm making, right? I'm not really even worried about what the listing price is, because that doesn't matter to me. So what I would say is figure out how you want to analyze these and then stick to those numbers, and that's the safest way to go.
Okay, very good. Next up is Mary. Go ahead and unmute yourself.
Hi, it's Eric and Mary. Eric and Mary, yeah. Questions. I have a couple questions. Our tenant buyer went ahead and paid a partial payment, and by the way, I looked at the video you told me about. Really good video. But in there, is there late notices that you can give for partial payments?
I haven't come across that, or I accept partial payments, and I think as long as a buyer is communicating and is still on good terms, I'm okay accepting partial payments. Some people say no, I don't want to do that at all, right? I'd rather have some cash than none. And if it came to where I had to file for eviction, I'd probably defer to what the lawyer told me to do. But I haven't run into that yet, and so thankfully I'm not there.
And I'll add to that. So I think it is a matter of, it looks like there are two schools of thought. If you go on our forum, I believe Scott, what he says, that we should be accepting payments, and there's nothing wrong with that, because considering logically, if you look at the market you're in, you're dealing with people who, some of them may have problem budgeting. So it makes sense to have or accept partial payments. I completely work very, very differently, but I've chosen that strategy on purpose. For me, I like to streamline my process, and I have Inago and I have it turned off. So I do not accept partial payment, and you cannot just do that. You also have to train your tenants, and I've done that. So which means from the very beginning, I told them that I will not accept partial payments. So they could be a 1 month late. I'm okay as long as they're paying the late fee and I do my notice, which means I actually have somebody physically put a notice on their door after the 10 days. And I'm telling you guys, that is one of the most effective tool, because it's a physical, document posted on the front door. It costs you maybe $50 to do that, but in my case, it's almost, so far it's 100% has been effective, which means they realize that you're serious. Calling and texting doesn't work, at least in my opinion. So what I'm just saying is have your own system, but whatever it is, just be consistent about it. You cannot sometimes accept partial payment and sometimes not.
Okay.
Amir,
are the documents online that we could see the notice that you put on the doors?
Oh, those are pretty standard. They should be in. I think Major can maybe put that link where we have all the documents.
Okay.
So what I'm referring to is the 10-day notice. So in most contract for deed, the rent is due on the 1st. It's late after the 5th, and after the 10th, usually you should have some language in your contract for deed that says that after the 10th, you are basically delinquent, and that's when you should be posting. So the more you delay it, the more you're training your tenants. Hey, it's okay. Don't worry about it. You can pay partial. I'll check with you in another 10 days. Well, guess what? They're going to do that.
Yeah.
So I'm serious. After the 10 days, I post them. And guess what? For me, even if it costs $50 to do that, remember, I'm also collecting late fees. And if I have to do evictions, it's good that I know ahead of time this is going to happen.
do you charge the tenants for that $50?
No, I don't, because
ledger?
remember, they're going to be paying the late fees anyway. So in most cases, all the rents are over $800, $900. So I'm already collecting late fees on those anyway, right? And so a late fee on $900 is, 10%, $90 right there. So it pays for it, So that's how I make the logic. But I know, I understand. For example, Joey has mentioned several times he takes partial payments. For him, it's important. But for me, I just like to do it in a very streamlined manner. But then the responsibility is on you to train your tenant buyers to let them know ahead of time, hey, this is the only option you have. You have no other option. You know. Did
Thank
we
you.
answer your question, Mary?
Yeah, I was gonna ask when are property taxes due in Illinois, because it's different from California.
Yeah, it's I think it's county to county. So for St. Clair County, I think it's in June or July, when they send out the notices. I've got a couple of properties in Decatur, and it hasn't come up yet, so I'm figuring sometime early in the year.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Next up is Dennis. Can you unmute yourself, please? Go ahead and ask your question.
Hi, Amir. Hello, everybody. Yeah, I have a question on interest rates. So my understanding is that if we have a tenant buyer, let's say I'm going to use 12%, say we sell them the property at 12% amortized over 30 years, we use the amortization schedule to get the payments and all that stuff. But when it comes to the, like say we do a private lender, and let's say we're going to pay them 12% over 5 years, to calculate that interest we're paying them, do we use the same amortization schedule? Like amortized, say we borrow 30,000 from them over 5 years, or that 12% amortized over 5 years, kind of like we do with the 12% at 30 years with a tenant buyer, or do we calculate it different, like an annualized interest on the 30,000 at 12%?
No, you just plug in 5 years instead of 30 on the amortization calculator, and it's principal and interest, and the principal increases every month until it's all paid off, and the interest decreases every month, but that payment stays the same.
Okay, so yeah, I guess what I was getting at is, and you answered it, when it comes to paying back our private lender, we just use the same amortization schedule that we use to figure out the payment for the tenant.
Same calculator, yeah,
Same
just with different numbers.
Okay, cool.
Okay, cool. Next up is Bill. Unmute yourself, please.
Hey, good. Couple of questions. I'll make it quick. Very fascinating. Happy to be here. So I saw a house. I was looking in Pennsylvania only because it's close to me. I know it's not a great state as far as one of the 9 that have already been pre-vetted, but it was close to me, so I went to look at some actual real live 35,000 and less houses. I saw one house there that I found I swear he must have been a student. He was using the same method. So he had the place for sale for 89,000, was looking for 850 a month, and would hold a mortgage. Didn't have a price, but I found the house, and here's my question: what do you do about if the ads are still online when you're selling it? Because his jig was up when I found it on Realtor for 25 grand, and he was asking 89 from me.
So I'm not sure. Are you saying this was somebody on school in our forum?
No, I don't know. But the method he was using reminded me, it made me think he must have had some sort of, he was doing this method. I believe he was doing this method because I found it, it was a rundown home. It was in a, not a great neighborhood. It was okay. But it was 25,000 on Realtor. He had it on Facebook Marketplace for 89.
So I can tell you without knowing the details, obviously we can't be certain. And first of all, this method that Scott has, the way he teaches us is very specific, but there's nothing new about contract for deed or agreement for deed. They've been around for many years. So there are many versions of this, and there are many people who are doing this. So that's number one. Number two, the issue about so understand how the MLS works. Again, my answer is it really depends, but I've seen this come up a lot of times. Sometimes, honestly, I'm sorry if somebody on this call is a real estate agent, but there are some real estate agents who are just very lazy. All right, the property might have sold, and they may not have updated the property. That's number one.
Which is likely if we're talking about a 2-day sale turnaround time.
Correct. So that's one issue. The number two issue is that, in fact, yes, that person is doing the same thing, but you shouldn't be buying from that person, right? Because that
Of
person is
course.
trying, right? So I just wanted you to understand that the fact that it's still showing active on the MLS, it means that it's definitely been sold, and they just haven't updated the listing.
It seems a tough thing to compete with if I want to put my property up for sale and it's still on there for 17,000, 25,000, whatever.
No. I'll
No?
tell you what. Remember what Scott says? Scott says that let's say somebody comes to you and they're looking at the homes in the neighborhood and they saw your listing and you have it listed for $70,000,
Right,
and
right.
and they
It's not for them.
correct. No, exactly. Let's say, well, then maybe you should buy that home, and they're gonna say, well, I don't have 20,000 or $17,000, and that's when you say, well, that's why I'm financing this for you, right? So I'm taking all the risk. I'm financing. I'm betting on you. So that's the logic there.
Okay. All right, that answers that. Uh, interest rate. Are we charging 11.4% or somewhere around there as an interest rate?
So depending on where you're buying, every state has their usually interest limits. So you just need to be aware of that. And so the good thing about our filling community, the people who fill the properties for us, especially if they're experienced, they are aware of that, and they will guide you and help you with that to remain under that limit.
Okay. I explained this to my son yesterday over lunch, and he looked at me like I was a bad banker and thought I was predatory. And we left, we parted ways, on good terms. But he looked at me and he was like, he was a little surprised, and I didn't know because I have not been exposed to that yet. So anyway, that answered that question. Um, Last question I think is fillers. I hear about these magical, wonderful little fairy dust fillers that run around and actually make this all possible. Who are they? What are they? How does that work?
Yeah, Fayaz, you might want to just add a little bit on that.
Sure. So there are several groups in the Freedom Accelerator that are doing this. I think there's actually one of the pages there lists several of them. Um, if you asked in school, you'd probably get a lot of people that said, "Yeah, I'm filling." So you send it out to all the fillers that you know, and you just tell them like, "Okay, look, this is the address, these are the specs, this is what we're hoping to make on it." And usually you want to aim high, and then if you're not getting any interest, then you can lower your numbers. And then they all send it out. They blast it out to all of their contacts. It'll be on Facebook Marketplace. You'll see it listed there. People have buyer lists of investors and of other people that are looking for these. So you just got a wide net.
Okay, so there's people out there that are active and willing and eager to do it quickly.
Absolutely. Yep.
Good.
And they're incentivized by you're paying them half of the down payment. So they wanna get the highest numbers they can so that they can maximize their profits as well.
Okay, and I think how do we?
All right, we're almost out of time, so
I'm good. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. So I'd like to thank Fayaz for your time. Thank you so much for showing up today, and we'll see you all guys next week. Thanks again. Take care. Bye bye.
Have a
Thanks,
good
Amir.
night.
This was great.